Whether intentional or not, Asian Americans have been underrepresented in the arts. Before diving into specific artists, it is imperative to give a brief history of Asian American culture. Similar to many ethnic groups entering the United States, Asians were marginalized and discriminated by the language that they speak, their cultural practices, and the color of their skin. They were denied citizenship and naturalization, as well as even denied interracial marriages. It was not until 1965 when Congress lifted all immigration laws overtly targeting Asian Americans. Asian American women, being another suppressed group on their own, were subjected to even more discriminatory practices. Generally, Asian cultures tend to desire the traditionally feminine qualities in women: submissiveness, timidness, and adaptiveness. The sexual and racial stereotypes plagued Asian women as they were perceived as China dolls or geishas. The sexualization of Asian women in media were detrimental to the psychological and social development of many Asian American women. A whopping 21 to 55% of Asian women living in the United States had suffered physical and sexual violence in their lifetime. The statistic may be understated because in most Asian cultures, these survivors of sexual violences are often hushed and sometimes even brainwashed into thinking it was their fault. Though most are hushed, there are few who are in the art community that speaks against sexual violence and bring into light the objectification of not only Asian women, but all women. Yoko Ono was one of the pioneers for performance art. Cut Piece was one of her well-known performance artwork that debuted in Kyoto, Japan in 1964. The performance involved her kneeling in front of the audience in her best clothing. She would encourage the audience to come up and cut pieces of her outfit as she sat there in silence. She performed this piece as an act of giving to her audience. In the beginning of the performance, the audience were hesitant in cutting her shirt. They would only cut small pieces from the neckline or her sleeves. As you can see in the video, she is sitting there in silence. She refrained from making much movement, and her face remained stoic. As the performance continues, the audience becomes increasingly assertive. Throughout the performance, she is not making much movement, if any. However, towards the end of the video, a male audience member, who had already cut her shirt, started cutting pieces of her bra. You can see Ono becoming increasingly self-aware and uncomfortable of what he was trying to do. It was not until he had cut her bra strap where she moved to hold her bra to her chest. This act in and of itself is indicative of sexual aggression and the objectification of women. Ono's inspiration for Cut Piece was the legend of Buddha and his journey to enlightenment. In the legend, Buddha had allowed a tiger to consume his body as an act of selfless giving. She indicated that there were parallels between her performance and the allegorical story. She had described the piece as a form of giving and taking. It was noted that it had been a criticism against artists who only give what they want to give. Though it was initially thought to be a performance about giving herself to the audience, there were underlying issues that were addressed throughout her performance: sexual aggression, violation of personal space, as well as the objectification and sexualization of women. The act of her sitting and not making any facial expression, noise, and movement made her seem like an object rather than a person. It became apparent that she became a sexual object once the audience became more daring with the cutting, especially towards the end when the male audience member snipped off her bra strap. The art piece had exposed the sexual aggression that society had on women. Our second artist is Cynthia Tom. Cynthia Tom is a mixed media artist, as well as a board president for the Asian American Women Artists Association, based in San Francisco. She is a fourth-generation Chinese American who is the founder and co-director of A Place of Her Own, which is an art-based healing program aimed primarily towards Asian American women. Her primary artistic style is surrealism, where she used concepts and ideas from her life and incorporated it in her art. She uses her art to tell stories primarily about the Asian American experience. Her aim is to break the stereotype of the model minority and encourage compassion amongst all people. She would speak to the women in her family to hear their stories and incorporate it in her art. By exploring her family history, she had discovered that her mother had been traded for opium, as well as other traumas that her family had endured. She had noted that if it was not for her passion for art, she would have not known of her family's struggles in America. One of Cynthia Tom's more feminist pieces was a part of her collection called Awakening the Feminine. The specific piece was named Woman Rising. The painting depicts a woman of Asian descent lifting her dress off the floor. However, what is peculiar about the painting is that her dress is the floor. This seemingly nonsensical artistic choice is very indicative of surrealism, especially since it's more dreamlike. Tom sought to symbolize the rising of women and to encourage women to get off the floor. The physical lifting of the floor is inspirational in the way that it can represent the groundbreaking movement that women are making in society. The inspiration for this particular painting was the Women's March that had taken place all over the world. Observing the woman's facial expression, there is a fierceness in her eyes that is emphasized by the fiery background. When analyzing the background behind the woman, the intensity and erratic nature of her brushstroke, paired with the rich, powerful hue of crimson, can be interpreted as a powerful storm, almost foreshadowing the rise of women in society. Art has been an outlet for women to not only heal, but also used as a tool to uncover their truth and their experiences as women. All types of art, whether it is performance art or visual art, can be used as a catalyst for triggering a person's emotion and mold their way of thought. Yoko Ono's performance of Cut Piece unveiled the issues of objectification and sexual violence towards women. Cynthia Tom's piece emphasized the rising of women in our current society. These two art pieces, though decades apart, acknowledges the ever-evolving culture and societal views of not only Asian American women, but all women from different backgrounds.